Hi, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Håkan Nilsson. I work with business development at DEK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you all to our first webinar, Distributed Agile Teams, Why and How. We will share our journey on cross-located teams between our Swedish and Vietnamese office. We're planning to keep on for 45 minutes. You can use the chat function found to the right during the webinar for technical questions or difficulties. We also encourage you to post questions there, and we'll try to answer them in the end if the time allows. The webinar is being recorded and distributed to all attendees after the webinar. First, a short word about DEK Technologies, who is bringing this webinar to you. DEK Technologies is an Australian engineering and consultancy company with over 400 employees and with offices worldwide. We offer both team-based and individual software engineering services. We are an agile company and work with clients and nationalities from all over the world. From our Stockholm office, we are working tightly together with clients and our other offices, mainly with Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam and in Melbourne, Australia. We do have offices around the world, and we also have projects going on even in even more countries and places. Now a presentation of the speakers. My colleagues, Paolo Damelio and Amir Namvar. Paolo Damelio is an enterprise agile coach at DEK Technologies, helping to establish and strengthen the agile mindset and practices. In the last years, Paolo has been involved with several agile transformations as a consultant coach and has been teaching and certifying more than 200 Agilists. Amir Namvar is a senior Scrum Master and software engineer at DEK Technologies. In addition, he's a consultant for some other companies where he teaches, mentors, and coaches Scrum Masters and Agile teams. His primary goal is to get high-performing teams by maximizing the collaboration. With that intro of DEK and presentation of these two gentlemen, thank you again for joining us today. I'm handing over to you guys for the why and how with distributed agile teams. Paolo.
Thanks, Håkan, and hello, everybody. So we start this webinar with the parts that I like the most. Why distribution? Why do we have distributed teams? So wouldn't that be easier just to be sitting all of us around the same table or just in the same room, maybe sipping coffee, all of us together, having lunch together, standing in front of a whiteboard while we brainstorm some topic about testing or about development? Well, that's an interesting thing that we want to discover a little bit more today, and we want to also share, I would say, our journey in DEK Technologies with what we have done recently in the last 4 or 5 years with distributed team. So let's first of all talk about different types of teams, like collocated, distributed. Well, there are different setups of teams. We can see here in this picture that there is the collocated, of course, where is like a team where all the team members, they are sitting in the same room or perhaps in the same floor of the same building, or maybe in 2 different buildings, but very closely with each other. And that's, I would say, probably the most simple or the simplest setup for a team. But then we see also different setups, things like distributed sub-teams, so where there is different parts of the team that they are spread in different cities, in different countries perhaps. And then we have something like fully dispersed team, where there is basically each team member coming from different countries, let's say, in the most difficult scenario. Or else like partially dispersed team, where there is the core of the team, maybe several members, they're sitting all together in one building or in one room, and then there is 1 or 2 members that they are joining the rest of the team from a different location. So with that in mind, I would like to ask all of you this simple question here. Considering the existing agile teams in the world today, how many of them do you think that are distributed? So now, if you see on the right-hand side, there is the poll, and I will publish it right now, so you are able to see it. So I would like to ask you to answer this. So what's the answer that you think is the correct one? Like, is it the A, more than 70%, or is it B, 50 to 70%, or C, 20 to 50%, or less than 20%? So take some time for thinking and answering here. Okay, so I can see some data here. The interesting part here is actually that right now, if you check this study that was done by this discipline, Agile Delivery and Agile at Scale 2016, we can see that more than 71% of the Agile teams are actually distributed right now or nowadays. And it's quite interesting data, and I think it gives some thinking about how actually distributed teams are very common right now in an Agile world. And if we move on to the next, what about the future? Well, more than half of us will be working remotely by 2020. So that was an estimation that came from a study that was done in the London Business School. And it's kind of like, I believe, interesting to know that this trend is actually growing more and more. So distributed teams are actually more and more popular nowadays, and will be even more. And then if we consider also this other research here, Sweden is a top place on the list of countries with the biggest skill shortage. So this is also another interesting index. This was from 2016. And in 2016 was the first time that Sweden was ranked the top in this list. I think that up to 2015, then it was actually USA that had the biggest skill shortage when it comes to work, and especially in the IT industry. While now, actually, Sweden is facing a quite strong, quite big skill shortage. So that's say something. What it says is basically we can't avoid distribution when it comes to software development teams. So let's look a bit more into the differences, or into like some very general items when it comes to co-located teams versus distributed teams. So here, when we talk about distributed teams, we talk about teams that are basically distributed sub-teams, or also dispersed team or partially dispersed team. So co-located are basically only those ones that where people are sitting closely with each other. When it comes to co-located, then of course it is easier to build up the team culture, and easier also to have good collaboration and communication, since everybody is working and spending time together. But then, of course, the team works only for 8 or maximum 10 hours, let's say. So it's basically the working time are the same for all the team members. And there can be also some less availability of talent. So when it comes, as well as I said, like skill shortage, for instance, that's a problem that many countries are facing. So, of course, there is less pool of people when it comes to finding the right people for an organization. But when it comes instead to distributed teams, well, the team could be available for more than 8 hours. That depends also on the time difference. So, for instance, we have seen in DEK Technologies Sweden, we work quite closely with DEK Technology Vietnam, and that time difference brings a lot of challenges, but also many benefits, because then we have potentially the double amount of time that we could provide if we think about, let's say, like some maintenance or some support team or something like that. Well, there is more hours during the day that can be spent into like into the work, basically, or providing some service. And then also more diversity. I mean, if you have, let's say, team members that are from different countries and that they are sitting remotely from different offices, then there is more probability that there is like higher diversity when it comes to cultures, and that also can be seen as a source of new ideas, and also can be economically and strategically more convenient. Well, it depends what are the other parts of the team or the office, but also when it comes to sitting near the customer. Let's say if there is a customer in Germany and then there is an office there, of course that can be also strategically more convenient. So it is also good to cover more areas. But then there are also some cons as well. Things like easier to fall into individual work. Let's say that you have a dispersed team where everybody's sitting alone in a different city. Then, of course, to boost the collaboration and teamwork might be more challenging. And also, like, misinterpretations and misunderstandings can take longer to be solved. It can be like misunderstanding or misinterpretation of requirements from a customer, or it can be some input from another team, or even like internally in a team where there are like two team members that they have some misunderstanding, and then probably they have to wait the day after for solving that. And of course, it's also more challenging to run agile ceremonies. We will see later with my colleagues Amir that there are many of the Scrum, Kanban ceremonies that actually they work the best if they're in a co-located team. But of course, we will look into some more like workaround. How can they work well also with distributed teams? But anyway, this is a challenge that is there, of course. So with this, then I would like to ask you one more interaction here. I would like to ask you another question. In your opinion, what are the most challenging things for distributed teams? Is it cultural differences? Is it language and communication? Or perhaps collaboration? Maybe time differences? Or customers' interactions? Or others? So again, on the right-hand side now, you can see already the poll. So you can now, from now on, you can vote.
I'd like to add also, you can choose multiple choices.
Great. So it's interesting. So it seems that the majority, even if it's a tight match there, but the majority seems that went for collaboration, which is, of course, bringing a lot of challenges to the work, to the teamwork, team spirit as well. So let's see. We will see a little bit more about collaboration and also language and communication in the next slides. So how distribution? Now we start to look a little bit more into tips and tricks of what we have seen or what we have experienced in DEK Technologies. So this is like, I would say, a very simple example of how we have right now our team set up with DEK Technologies Sweden. So we have some of the co-located teams that are basically 100% in Sweden, sitting in Stockholm, Kista office. And then the same thing, we have like an office in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City. And for that office as well, we have like co-located teams that are working only like with Vietnam. And then it can be that they have like customer towards like some other countries as well. But anyway, most of the team members or all the team members in such setup, they're sitting all of them together, co-located. And then we have situations like that you see in the middle of this picture, where we have different teams that are distributed, Sweden and Vietnam. So now when it comes to DEK Technologies Sweden, we have sort of distributed sub-teams. So we try to have, when possible, of course, half of the team that is located in Stockholm and the other half in Ho Chi Minh City. But then, of course, there are different situations, different setup. For example, like we have some teams where there is like one product owner only on one side of the two parts, and then there is another situation where maybe one developer is on the other side while all the other developers. So it's kind of like dispersed as well. One thing that we have actually noticed that might help is also that we have the enterprise coaches, or let's say some sort of coach that is not part of the team, but they are like external to the teams, and that is basically there for trying to help out the teams into, like, for instance, boosting collaboration or driving some activity or helping out when there is the forming of a team. And they basically work with different teams, both co-located, if they are the coaches, like for instance in Sweden, then they work with the co-located teams in Sweden, but also they help out the teams that are distributed. For instance, like when there is a distributed team, Sweden, Vietnam, then we have two different coaches from two different parts or two different sides that can sort of like tackle the problem from two different sides. So that's the setup that we have. Of course, there are many more teams. This is like very simplified picture of it. But let's start with the first thing first. So forming a fantastic distributed team, what are the things to consider at the beginning? Let's say that there is a new team or the organization needs a new team there. So what are the things that are the most important to be considered? Well, first of all, personality and interests. So basically people. So that's very an important question is how those people will fit with each other, will be suitable with each other, how the personality of the entire team or the personality of different members will actually work out like later on. And what are their interests? Do they have similar interests? Is that maybe something that will bind them together? So that's something that needs to be also considered even more in a distributed team than what would be considered in a collocated. And then, of course, time zone. Time zone is also very important. Some of you has already mentioned that might be the most challenging area, but well, I think that is kind of like crucial. And if we consider that there might be very different time zone around the world, so we have also in DEK Technology an office in Australia, and it is tricky sometimes when we want to set up some meeting with somebody in Australia, and we need to start the meeting at 8 a.m. in Sweden, and there in Australia is already 6 p.m. So if the meeting is 1 hour or 2 hours long, then you can imagine how difficult it can be. So of course, time zone is a key sort of factor there, and that's one of the reasons why we have our teams like distributed with Vietnam and not with Australia, because it can be actually quite tricky. But then, of course, it's something that needs to be considered, like to keep it at least within some sort of limits. And then, of course, reasonable size. That's also very important, because if we think about Scrum, for instance, then the size of a team, or development team, or a Scrum team should be something like between 3 and 9. And that's also something that I believe is very valid into like distributed teams. We have also in DEK Technology noticed that teams of 7, 8 people, then they are kind of the best size there, because then you avoid subgroups, or you avoid this kind of like splitting down the teams too much into subgroups. And also like cross-functional skills. Again, this is something that needs to be there and needs to be considered so that the team can be cross-functional as much as possible. And then also creating coherence. So that's also something very important. So I believe that when it comes to distributed teams, we really need to have the team members that they have this kind of bond with each other, and they really want to work together. They feel like, okay, we are a team, despite like the thousands of kilometers in between us. Then still we want to be just one team and not sub-teams. So this is also important, I think, at the beginning to actually create this coherence. And many companies, they do it in different ways. There are like many team building activities. I was very interested about one research that I was reading some time ago, when they say that it's very crucial to have team building activities from beginning when a team is formed, but also it's also important to have at the beginning some sort of challenge for a team, so that the team members feel like, well, we need to work together now to fix or to solve this challenge. And that's something that creates a bond that is even stronger than team building activities, when people, they feel like, okay, we need to now like go out for a drink, or we need to go out for playing something together. Well, that kind of creates a bond and then binds people together. But sometimes, or at least in this research that I was reading, it is also mentioned like how much a bond that is created on a common challenge can be stronger than any other. So I think that Amir later will talk more about the building activity we have in DEK Technologies, but then also something to consider, like how to create a bond from beginning of a team. And also balancing the leadership. Here, when I'm talking about leadership, I mean, it can be like if there is a Scrum team with a Scrum Master, the Scrum Master can be seen as a leader. But if there is some developer very experienced, then of course that will be the leader in his area. But also if there is maybe the product owner that is like in a meeting and is like facilitating a meeting and has a lot of knowledge about what are the customer requirements, then of course that person that will be facilitating the meeting, then will be the leader of that discussion. So it is also important to balance the leadership, so that it will not be that several leaders are on one side and no leaders on another side, which will create some sort of discrepancy or gap. And it will end up in having one part or half of the team that will be very proactive and the other half that will be instead a little bit more silent during a conversation. So those are things to consider. There are many more, but we try to summarize with those ones that we have noticed that they are very crucial. Next part here is something that we call team kickoff, and we have been doing this in DEK now for quite many years. And what we do is that we gather all the team for half day or 1 day, and then we run this thing called team kickoff. What we want to do is like to give a fresh start, a good start to the team, and then what we try to set up together with the team. Usually it is like run by the agile coaches of DEK Technologies, and then we have those activities, things like we try to set up together, all team members, what are the agile methods and roles that we are going to have, what is the team logo, what are the working agreements, things like the standards or the norms of a team when it comes to meetings, when it comes to some simple behavior, some standards, and also like, of course, the team name that will be used, and then get to know each other. So that's something that can be done by different activities, games, anything that will actually make people get to know each other more. And also acknowledge the differences. So if we have a team where there are team members from different part of the world, well, that's also something very important to have, like those acknowledging of differences. And then team goals and vision. This is also something that connected with what I mentioned before, to have the same sort of challenge. Well, it's important to have a direction, to have goals for the team, and to have also like a vision, what the team want to be. And this is also something, the kickoff, that we run when there is a big part of the team that is changed. So let's say that there is like a sort of restructure or something has changed in a team and there are many team members that have changed. Well, that's also something that we tend to rerun. It's like a refreshment kickoff. So here I will hand it over to Amir to go a little bit more into some extra tricks.
Thanks,
so
Paolo.
please.
So in this page, we'll discuss about the team culture and team spirit. I think we already had this first step, which is this team kickoff. We established the way of working of the team and also the team culture. But why team culture is important? Building a good team culture will help you to keep your team members motivated, which affect their performance, how they treat customer and other team members, and how well they do their jobs. So it's quite important. On the other hand, lack of team culture or bad team culture also produces undesirable traits in your team. A lack of team spirit, gossip, bad habits, and unfriendly competition or all sign of bad culture and dangerous to the team productivity. So this team culture has the direct effect on the performance of the team. In a Colocated team, building a culture is fairly straightforward, since everyone is in the same place at the same time. If you want to go for a movie or have a coffee together or do a quick activity before work, you can get everyone together with minimal planning. So it's much easier for Colocated team. But in a remote team, culture building activities are harder to implement, although not impossible. Here, I will describe some of the practices or our experience to build this culture. First, as Paolo mentioned, which is really important to bind the team members together, is to handle the shared challenge. So in this way, they try to support each other, to establish the relationship with each other, and then to achieve the goal of that challenge. Another things that we're doing is like team building activities. We have the budget, which is supported by our company, DEK Technology, but unfortunately, we cannot spend this budget together like Sweden side and Vietnam side. We have different type of team activity in both sides, but some other times we are running some like the gaming code all together. So we have some fun time or fun hours together, which is another item here. We have also weekly remote fika. This fika is a Swedish culture of drinking coffee together, chatting, and also have a small snack or like cookies. So this one we have introduced to our Vietnam side, and then once a week, sometimes we sit together and then we're chatting, we're drinking coffee together, and then we have an informal discussion. Another item is like achievement of celebrating the achievements. This one is like when we are delivering the work or when we are transferring a customer's request, we try to celebrate it with a piece of cake or the sparkling wine together. So this gives like this victory feeling, like we did this all together, and then this binds us to our team members. Another experience that we had was like 10% creative time. So this is also something supported by our company. So we are spending this 10% on fun projects, and sometimes, let's say, we are reading the books together, we are sharing our knowledge. If we are joining any meetups or conferences, we try to share this knowledge with our team members in this 10% or 10% hours creative time. So this is how we try to develop the team culture inside our distributed teams. Collaboration, this is an interesting topic. I think this topic or this area got the highest vote in our poll. So what collaboration means? Collaboration simply means to work jointly rather than independently to accomplish a task. So why collaboration is important in Agile team? If we look, there are two of the 4 values in the Agile manifesto highlights the emphasis Agile methodologies place on a strong collaboration. So the first one is individual and interactions over process and tools. This reminds us of the importance of a strong and respectful communication and collaboration. So this is the second, like the second item in the Agile manifesto, which is pointing to the collaboration. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This reminds us that it's more important for a development team to allow for some flexibility to please the customer, seeking the collaborative solution to the issue that might arise during product development, rather than to stick to the rigid contract and plan. So basically, if you're not collaborative, you can't welcome changing requirements from your customer side. You can't understand the customer motivations, embrace the change, honestly communicate the impact of changes with your customer's product owner. If you're not collaborative, you don't have a good understanding of what it will take to satisfy the customer. You have difficulty encouraging their comments and absorbing their feedbacks. So I like this sentence. If you're not collaborative, you are not agile. Becoming collaborative need to prerequisite tasks. The organization should support it and reward it. I will explain this later more. And the individual need to develop the habit and behavior that realize this collaboration. So about the companies support you or like organizations support you to be collaborative. I have seen in some organization, the manager says like, we need to have all our resources PC. And some of the practices, which I will explain later, pair programming, mode programming, they said this is waste of time because we're not handling the parallel task. So I will describe, like before, I will describe some of the practices that we have done with our distributed teams to encourage the collaboration and maximize it. First is like knowledge sharing meetings. We try to share our knowledge as much as possible. This is like in different areas. For example, if you're receiving the new request from our customers, we try to run the pre-study. And those people who are responsible to run this pre-study, they will share it with the other team members. If somebody joins the meeting, conference, or any meetup, which is interesting for the team, they try to prepare the short presentation and share their knowledge, their understanding from that conference with the other team members. This is how we're sitting together and we try to transfer our knowledge as much as possible. The second practice that we had quite successful result from it is pair programming. What's pair programming? Maybe many of you know it. Pair programming means like 2 people sitting at the same computer. One is driving, basically writing the code, and the other person is navigating. So navigator is like giving the hints or explaining what the driver needs to do. So basically the driver is just following the instruction from the navigators. We are running this in our distributed teams, and it's really useful to bring up to working or like to coach the newcomers when they join our team to transfer the knowledge. Another practice that we have done in our teams is mode programming. Mode programming is quite similar to pair programming, but the only difference is that whole team sits together. So except the driver, the rest of the team are navigators. So with this practice, we're sharing the knowledge, we're sharing the ideas, we are reviewing our work all together, and also we are transferring the knowledge. And we had another practice, which we had the product owner also in this mode programming, which we got the customer insight in that meeting. So another like practices that we have done especially to support our customers for fixing the bugs was like handover, takeover. We have received really crucial or like emergency bug from one of our customers. We wanted to fix it as soon as possible. as we said, we can almost work like 24 hours, like 22 hours with Vietnam. So one person in Sweden was started to work with this bug. And when he was leaving, going home, he was handing over to the Vietnam side. And when they are starting in their morning, which is like midnight in Sweden, so they have all the information from the investigation or like the starting point of this bug fix. So in this way, we tried to fix this bug, and it took like, I think, less than 2 days for us. But if single person in one side wants to work on this, it will take like at least 4 or 5 days. So usually the poor collaboration is a result of poor relationship. Also formally mentioned these practices, expanding the relationship, we found that can be maximized if people meet each other in person. In DEK Technologies, we are trying to send the team members to the other side and meet face-to-face other team members, but not always easy and efficient to send all. So this is it's the best feeling if you meet in person, if that is possible. Okay, communication, a feel of being in the same room. This is the biggest challenge when we like facing with the distributed teams. We don't have this feeling that we're sitting together. Actually, this communication within distributed team is challenging for most people. I think this has also highest vote. So do we have this, like, let me take a look into, yes, 30% of the people after collaboration, this got the highest vote in our poll. So communicating with people in your own country with whom you share a language, culture, and many other similarities is already challenging. With people from another country, different time zone, culture and language, it's even more challenging. Remote communication can be both enjoyable and frustrating at the same time because you need to use some tools, and without seeing the people face to face, you need to try to understand each other and also transfer your points. So the first item, which is challenging, is the language and cultural differences. Okay, we have this chart. This is quite interesting. This shows the richness of communication versus the communication effectiveness. So as we see, the lowest or the coolest communication channel with the least effectiveness is like a paper. And then we have audio tape, we have video tape, and in the middle we have email conversation because this is also written. Then we have phone conversation, which we have like the voice, and then we can also talk in the middle, or like we answer to the question on the phone. And then next we have video conversation, and then face-to-face conversation. And the best with the hottest richness of communication channel and best efficiency is face-to-face with the whiteboard, which you can illustrate your points in that whiteboard. So with our distributed teams, we try to be in the right or like top part of this chart. So I will explain about, we started with the video conversations, and also we try to add this whiteboard also into our video conversations. So Agile development principle number 6 says, enable face-to-face interaction communication is more successful when development teams are co-located. So this is even important for co-located team, but we need to get it also for the distributed teams. So let's talk about tools for effective communication. So first we have this language and cultural differences. So when we started to work with Vietnam at the beginning, it was not really understandable while we were talking purely with phone. What we decided to do in that moment was that we need to speak slowly and loudly. And if somebody doesn't understand the other side's point, they need to raise hand or ask question. I don't understand, can you repeat? This was the first thing. We shouldn't be shameful. We need to ask if we don't understand. This is really important while you're working with distributed teams. The second practices that we started to work with, and it was really successful, was that we introduced the instant messaging and chat channel. We have used different tools, Skype for Business, Slack. And then we created the chat room for the team, which you can post the technical question, doubts, or even like the fun messages to each other. Another interesting thing we have introduced, let's call it a window on the other side. We have the real-time video ongoing during the day. It means we can see each other. From Sweden, we can see Vietnam. From Vietnam, we can see Sweden. The funny story is that when we started with this real-time video, there were some some people in Vietnam side were worried, or maybe managers will monitor us. It was not in that team, but the other team, since they are sitting in the open area or landscape office. But we tried to explain and being transparent. This video is only used inside the team. So it means like the team members, they can see each other and there is no one monitoring the people. And then they have accepted. This is also this cultural difference sometimes. The people bring this question, if somebody wants to monitor us or like listening to us. So the other thing that we have introduced is like team mailing list. This is like to share the knowledge equally between all team members. So we put this rule in some of our teams. If you're sending the email outside or receiving the email, just you're involved, it's better to be shared in this mailing list that everyone inside the team get the equal kind of information, and then we transfer the information within the team. This has another benefit. If somebody is on vacation, but he's receiving or she's receiving the request, the other team members can help with that request. And at the end, we say video is a must. We try to have the video and voice in all type of our meetings. So, in this slide, I will discuss. I will tell about the Scrum and Kanban ceremonies. I can mention the tools are facilitating the work a lot when you work with the distributed teams. First of all, like first ceremony you have is like the daily stand-up. It's really, really nice to use the digital Scrum or Kanban boards in order to get the synchronized information in both sides. How we are handling this daily stand-up, basically we're standing in front of the TV, we're sharing our digital Scrum or Kanban board, and then we try to speak with each other. So, and also we see each other in front of that TV. The second one is like the good quality sound and video. This is really crucial for all type of meeting, just not like for the Scrum and Kanban ceremonies. We have tried so many devices until we find out what is the best solution for us. We have started with phone, Polycom, different tools, different like applications, as I mentioned, like Skype for business, live stream, Google Hangouts, so many things we have used until we find out which gives the best quality to us. So it's good that you adjust or find out which tool and application give you the best quality to use it in the daily work. Retrospectives are crucial because this ceremony in a Scrum enable you to gather the feedback about the process or about each other. So in order to have an efficient retrospective, we have introduced some tools that everyone can write at the same time. So just as an example, we can have like the Google Doc shares we have used, Fun Retro idea boards. These tools enable you to gather everyone's idea, facilitate the voting process, and make it easier to spread the action. So meeting facilitators, what does that mean? So at the beginning, when we started with these distributed teams, setting up the meeting was taking time, still taking the time, but it was like whole meeting sitting in the team, and then there were like one people in each side trying to establish the environment, and it was like wasting 10 minutes of everyone's time. So let's say 8 people waiting for 10 minutes, it means like 80 minutes. Later, we said, okay, 2 people are responsible, 1 people in each side is responsible to go to the meeting room 10 minutes before the meeting starts. And then they set up this environment. So in this case, we're spending 20 minutes instead of like 80 minutes. At the same time, we started to use the agenda for the meeting, put the time limit, and also for each section of the agenda, we put the time. So this like attracted people to join the meeting when they see the agenda. This is interesting for them, and also avoid that the people get bored in the meeting. So I think this is like a good practice. We set up the environment in advance, and then we have an agenda which is shared in advance with everyone who is invited into the meeting. Good. This was for me. So now we reach to the question and answer. I've seen already some of you post a question, but feel free to add your question. You see in the right-hand toolbox or like the bottoms, there is the question side, which you can post your question, and then we will try to answer as much as we can by considering the remaining time.
So let's take other few seconds for giving possibility of writing down some nice question. Okay, maybe we can start with the first question, and in case there are other coming, then we can take them. So we just have a few minutes left. So let's read the first question, which is, what are the biggest challenges of distributed teams according to research, if there are any such results? Well, I believe that if I recall correctly, like some of the research and study that I was reading lately, I think that there is quite much into collaboration. So the same that maps with your majority of votes, where there is a lot of buzz, there are a lot of talks about like how can you really have a team that collaborates, like having like two parts in two different continents maybe. And I think that that's the one that generates the more talk around the web, at least. And in meetups and the gathering communities. So the collaboration is quite crucial. But actually, one of the key factors that is stopping the distributed teams even more than collaboration, it is actually communication. So if you think about a situation when a customer would like to have, let's say, like a distributed team, and then there are a lot of challenges that they are basically customers or organizations are afraid of jumping into the distributed team setup, because then there are big problem with communication. And then the question is, what about if there is some problem? How should we do? Should we run there? Should we just like fly in the other side of the world and try to fix it, or they should come here? So that is a kind of a stopping issue that's already sort of like stops many companies or many teams from working distributed teams.
I agree with you, Paulo. In many articles and research I have seen, they have mentioned collaboration, communication, and under the communication, this language and culture difference, they have mentioned as the most challenging items when you're working with distributed teams. So shall we move on to the second question? I will go through it. How many different type of tasks your distributed team work with at the same time? Or how many different type of tasks a distributed team should work with at the same time? So what I can say, we have, when we do the planning for our teams, we have all the tasks, items, or let's call it user stories, in order or in priority. So the way that we're handling, we're collaborating to finish or finalize the first user story, which has the highest priority. Then we will move on to the second. I can say in many teams that I have seen, there are like 2-3 user stories at a time ongoing until they complete the sprint or they complete their planned period. Yeah.
Yes. So great.
I think we're almost reached our time, and then we have one more question left. I think we'll share our contact details, and then if you have any further question, you're very welcome to post for us, for Paolo or me. Here is our contacts, our LinkedIn webpage, and also our email addresses. Feel free to send your question, and then we'll try to answer. And this webinar is recorded, and we'll spread the link later. You can access it, and then you can listen it again, or feel free to share with your friends, colleagues later. Thanks for participation.
Yes, thanks for participation. And probably, I believe that within 1 or 2 days, we will send out this link so that you can either replay it or you can like share it with any contacts if you want. And yes, this is also like the first of our series of webinars. So we believe that we will have a new topic soon. So we will share more info with you in the future, and we'll be glad to see you again. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and have a nice evening or have a nice day.